We got some conference realignment news. Let's get your thoughts on Oregon State, Washington State win exclusive control of the Pac-12. Not really a realignment news, but it could lead to realignment news. What does that mean for Oregon State and Washington State and the future members of the Pac-12? Oh, we got Caleb back here. What does that mean for the future of the Pac-12? We've got Oregon State and Washington State assuming control. What does that mean?
So this is a Pac-12 bylaw, and this was something that they all signed to save the conference about 10, I don't know how many years ago they signed it, but when they all thought the future of the Pac-12 was bright. Basically, the bylaw says that if you plan to leave the Pac-12, even if you're still competing in a Pac-12 during an academic year, you lose all power over what happens that year. So basically, by leaving the Pac-12, even though they're in the Pac-12 right now, the other 10 schools have lost any control, any voting power whatsoever on what to do with the Pac-12. So theoretically, Oregon State and Washington State, since they're the only ones left, just won a court case. That's very clear in writing. The ruling was right, that they could theoretically just say, we've decided to redistribute all the revenue from this year to only Oregon State and Washington State. No money for you, Washington. No money for you, USC. No money for any of you guys. So Washington, it's being appealed. But if this appeal doesn't work, these programs might not, they're in danger, because even though the Big Ten revenue is coming, Dave, I don't care how much revenue you're getting, you can't go a full year without making any money.
No, you absolutely cannot. Portions of the program brought to you by Apex Apparel Group. Design, brand, market your way. Outfit your entire company. Unique products to promote your business with unparalleled customer service. ApexApparelGroup.com. It's right down below. Go to ApexApparelGroup.com. Yeah, I got to ask you this, though. Is it good to have some leadership? At least Oregon State and Washington State are stepping up to be leaders of that conference, which has had no leadership. And it leads me to Four Downs, if you don't mind. Four Downs brought to you by our friends at City Heating and Air. 50 years in East Tennessee. I'll tell you more. Four Downs is now, as it's brought to you by our friends at City Heating and Air. Go to cityheatandair.com.
Four Downs. 4 questions. 4 answers. The Dave Hooker Show. Four Downs. A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
Okay, so when you talk about one or two programs having control of the Pac-12, it makes me think of Alabama and the SEC. So I want to go to a couple of downs here via our friend Cooper Mays, who will certainly tell you to do what?
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
Thank you, Coop. I appreciate that.
Coop here. First down.
All right. Do you think Alabama and Nick Saban control the SEC when it comes to key decisions? Yay or nay, Caleb?
I don't think they control it. I think they have a significant amount of power. I don't think they control it. Again, the reason this is Oregon State and Washington State is because they're the only 2 Pac-12 teams left. They're the only ones there. That is the Pac-12. Right. So, like, the parallel would be if Alabama was the only SEC team. I think Nick Saban is like, if you ever watched House of Cards before Kevin Spacey rightly got canceled, given what he's done in the past. But Nick Saban is like that politician that has, at any given moment, all the votes he needs in his back pocket to get a bill passed because he has wielded so much power. He is that. What Nick Saban has so many connections. He can, like you talked about it, you enlighten me on this. He can go to Shane Beamer and say, I need you to vote for this. I need that South Carolina to vote for this because I might need you, and if you need a job in the future, you better vote for this after you get fired.
All right. Which down's next, Coop?
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
All right. So I ask you this. Does Alabama have too much power recently? They weigh in on the pace of play. They weigh in on NIL. It's a lot of Nick Saban. Do you think he's really had an effect? I do know that he had an effect with the scheduling issue, that they wanted to go ahead and get that pinned down. I think that at the spring meetings, Nick Saban blew that up. To me, that's too much power. I mean, to me, this sounds crazy, but the conference is probably better off from a leadership standpoint. And you get on Greg Sankey all the time, but this is a different conference that is led by one team. I think you could argue that the SEC will be better off from a leadership standpoint when Nick Saban decides to call it a career.
If Nick Saban had this much power, there would have been more rules in place to slow the game down, and he didn't get that. And if Nick Saban had this much power there, but yes, I do. And here's why I do think he has too much power. You're seeing right now constant movement in Congress at the behest of the SEC to regulate NIL in a way that favors Alabama. Because the reason Nick Saban wants it regulated, Dave, let's be honest, Saban wants it regulated because Saban can't outbid Texas A&M or Tennessee for players. Texas A&M and Tennessee have more money. And I laugh at that because that's why they want to regulate NIL. They want the schools that are loaded with talent, they want the advantage of them being loaded with recruiting talent so money doesn't have to be a factor. NIL does not help the Ohio States, the Georgias, the LSUs, or the Alabamas. It doesn't help the schools, Dave, that are loaded with talent to recruit in their backyard. It helps the schools that aren't loaded with talent. Texas A&M is an exception because they're in Tech, although Texas recruits are actually overrated, but that's a different story for another day.
Yep. Here we go. What down, Coop?
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
All right. Third down. Has his leadership been good? The decisions that he's tried to push out there.
Who?
Nick Saban. So I'm saying absolutely not. I think the pace of play that he tried to stymie is more exciting than we've had in the past. I think that that was purely self-motivated. NIL, and a lot of people may see this differently than me, but NIL and the transfer portal, I think could have been better governed because it wasn't supposed to help in recruiting quite so much. But I have no problem with it being a part of the sport because I think the kids deserve more money. So has it been good or bad? I would say his directives and what he wanted to do for the sport have, for the most part, been bad.
Yeah, I think they've been bad. If Nick Saban had his way, Vegas lines would determine who goes to the college football playoff. I mean, this goes back to 2011. Nick Saban's responsible for the college football playoff when he had a vote in the coaches poll, and it was between Alabama and Oklahoma State. If you remember that year, Dave, Alabama for a rematch with LSU or Oklahoma State. Nick Saban voted himself number 2, and then he voted Oklahoma State number 5 to skew the BCS stats a little bit. You shouldn't be allowed to vote if you're in contention for the national title during that time. But yes.
Yep. City heating and air conditioning, 50 years before we get to fourth down. 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters. Don't trust a fly-by-night HVAC company to tell you that your new unit could cost thousands or more. Go to cityheatandair.com. That's cityheatandair.com. All right, fourth down, Coop.
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. Fourth down.
Has it affected his bottom line, his win-loss record at any point?
No, not really. I mean, I guess you could say the time he voted himself number 2 to go win another national title against LSU. I guess doing that affected recruiting because Alabama was raking in number 1 recruiting classes, but I think they were doing that anyway. It hadn't affected his bottom line. As a matter of fact, Saban trying to slow the game, Saban adapting the tempo, he's proven that he went about this the wrong way, if you think about it, Dave, because what did Kirby Smart do? Kirby Smart realized everybody's trying to run tempo. I'm going to slow it down, and no one's going to be prepared for that, and I'll have the advantage. And now Saban is following Kirby Smart and slowing it down. What Saban should have realized was if I stick with my guns, I'll have an advantage over every other team. And so I don't think it's affected his bottom line. I think if anything, it might have hurt his bottom line.
Interesting. Okay, let's go to this. We had a question on the message board that I want to answer, and it's a really good one. You can see it if you're on the YouTube page right now. Hit like and subscribe. We greatly appreciate that. Portions of the program brought to you by Herald Group Security Solutions, leadership experience specialization, addressing problems through unique mission-specific mitigation techniques, making your children safer at school, one school at a time. We're in private schools now, want to be in public schools. So be sure and reach out to your school administrator and tell them to call Herald Group Security Solutions. So the question from Rocky Top Tom is, do y'all see either the NIL being retracted as a policy or schools refusing to pay unproven incoming freshmen and paying their upperclassmen to return versus going pro? Retracted as a policy, no. But I think if you're Alabama or Georgia, you're wiser setting up your NIL money to boost up maybe those sophomores that aren't playing or those seniors that are considering going to the NFL. So I think you could see for some schools NIL being more internal than other schools like Tennessee, where despite what it's intended to do, it's being used for recruiting. Right, Caleb?
Yes, and I'm going to say, and here's why this NIL. First, let's start with the first one. Here's why the NIL will never be retracted, ever. This Supreme Court right now is made up of more employer-friendly judges than ever before. It's a 6-3 conservative majority, and they still unanimously ruled in favor of the athletes. This was the court that was the best chance for the NCAA to hold it up, and they lost 9-0. It's never getting retracted unless you repeal the Sherman Antitrust Act, which has been law since 1880, whatever. That's not getting repealed, and the Supreme Court is going to uphold that forever, never getting retracted. So,
Yep.
To the next point, that's a good point, Rocket Top Tom. You are right. The question is, how do they adapt to NIL? And there is a possibility of them not. If you are Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, you probably do have a little bit of pull to say we're not going to pay you as a freshman at this point, but look at what you could get out of us. And there will be players that choose to come back because of NIL money. I think there's two types of players that will do that. Number one is basketball players, because Dave, you know as well as I do, college basketball does not translate to the NBA at all. There's hardly any translation from college basketball. The greatest college basketball players are not, like Christian Laettner is a top 5 college player of all time. And so there will be more value for a lot of players to stay in college and go to the NBA. College football translates to the NFL largely except for quarterback. The best college quarterbacks, almost all of them. If I named the top 5 college quarterbacks, would any of them be NFL starters long term?
No.
Yeah. So quarterbacks will have a lot of money to make, more money to make in college and the pros. I think the rest, if you're an elite wide receiver in college, 99% of the time you're an elite wide receiver in the NFL, right? And
yeah, I think it depends on the position. Let's talk about Cooper Mays for a second and his decision that he's going to face here in a couple of weeks. Brought to you by Don Self, State Farm in Collegedale and Ottawa, as well as the greater Chattanooga area. Customer service still matters. Don Self, for well over 40 years, they built their business on reputation and taking care of their customers. Don and his team pride themselves on making sure you and your family won't have any surprises at the time of the claim. Customer service still matters. Don Self, your friendly neighborhood State Farm agent for the greater Chattanooga area. Call him, Google him, or you can check out the link right below for Don Self. Caleb, if you're Cooper Mays, I'm just going to throw random numbers out there, okay? You had an injury. It's your second season that you've dealt with injury, so that's going to be a black mark on your application to the NFL. They're going to say often injured, whether it's fair or not. And you're making, and I'm going to throw a random number out there. I have no idea. But you're making $100,000 a year, and you look at the chances of coming back to Tennessee or the prospects of coming back to Tennessee, and you can improve your draft stock from a 4th to 7th round pick to, let's say, a 5th to 7th round pick to a 3rd to 4th round pick. You're not making huge money, but you're making $100K. I think the minimum in the NFL is what, $800K? Do you make an argument to help your draft status? So we have one tangible player right here that could improve from a 5th to 6th grade to, let's say, a 3 to 4 grade. Would you do that if you were in his position? All of that's hypothetical. I want to be really clear. So I'm not Cooper Mays's accountant. I don't know what he makes, but just your thoughts on that.
I think that, but your draft status will be the factor in that, not whether or not you're making the 100,000. I mean, that's something that hasn't changed. I mean, that was a thing before NIL. I actually learned. Think about this, Dave. Al Wilson chose to come back for his senior year. They moved him to middle linebacker. That turned him from a 5th rounder to a 1st rounder. That alone, just coming.
Well, that's true, but in a lot of situations, money is a factor. And with that 98 team, he came back, and I don't know Al's financial situation with his family either, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But yes, he did come back. However, Caleb, there are some guys where $100,000, which I think is an understandable going rate for a well-known player. I mean, I see Cooper on billboards. I work with Cooper. We pay him. So I think $100,000 would be some motivation to say, I'm going to come back and improve my status, as opposed to I need to go here and make this money like yesterday. I think it would change your thinking slightly, wouldn't it?
What it would do is it would actually allow you to make a more rational decision over your draft if you should come back, because you won't be chasing the money even if you can improve your draft stock. So it allows you to make a more rational decision about that. So you won't be Scottie Pippen in 1991 asking for a 7-year extension for $18 million, when if you had just waited 2 years, you would have gotten a $50 million deal. And so,
True.
Yes, that part. So that is where it is better for the players in that regard, where they can maybe come back, because $100,000 can keep them and maybe their families afloat. That's a very good point. But yeah, I think largely, if you're Cooper Mays, for instance, given his family situation, he probably, with or without NIL, would just make a decision based on his draft status.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, Coop's not the best example in that regard, but there are other guys. I felt like there have been guys over the years that needed to make money for their family, and guys that were from Compton, or guys that were rural, like Jason Witten. I think that his family could have used the money at the time, and so I certainly understood that.